Have you ever had someone in your life, a friend, a family member, and you realized later they were slowly eroding your peace? For 9 years, I had a best friend. We shared laughter, tears, and countless memories. But over time, the bond we once cherished became a weight that dragged me down. It wasn't a sudden realization. It was the accumulation of moments when I felt unseen, unvalued, and used. I learned that true connections are meant to uplift, not drain. As Marcus Aurelius once said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. In the face of such relationships, creating distance isn't selfish, it's necessary for your inner peace. In this video, I'll share 8 signs you should cut ties, even with family or friends. Whether it's toxic behaviors, financial manipulation, or a refusal to grow, these lessons are rooted in Stoic philosophy and my personal experience. Stick around because at the end, I'll guide you through the most practical way to apply these principles, helping you reclaim your peace and strengthen your emotional resilience. If you value insights that help you find clarity and protect your inner balance, hit the like button and subscribe to Stoic Narratives Official. Let's grow together as we embrace wisdom, peace, and self-respect. 1. Love shouldn't cost your self-worth. Have you ever felt smaller in someone's presence? As if every decision you made, every word you spoke, had to be measured against their judgment? This is where I found myself in a 9-year friendship. It wasn't always like this. In the beginning, our bond was filled with joy, trust, and mutual support. But as time went on, cracks appeared, subtle but deep. His words, once kind, turned sharp. His actions, once caring, became indifferent. I realized I was holding on to the image of what our friendship used to be, not what it had become. True connections should be nurtured, not diminished. Love, whether from friends or family, should never demand that you compromise your sense of self. Stoicism reminds us of this essential truth. Be tolerant of others and strict with yourself. This philosophy teaches us that while we must show compassion, we should never allow others to cross the boundaries of our self-worth. One day, after yet another moment where my feelings were dismissed, I stopped and asked myself, why am I tolerating this? The answer was uncomfortable. I was afraid of losing a long-time bond, of facing the void that his absence might leave. But in clinging to that fear, I was betraying myself. It's easy to justify staying in toxic relationships. We tell ourselves stories. Maybe they're just going through a rough time, or if I'm patient, they'll change. But when someone consistently devalues your worth, no explanation or excuse can make that behavior acceptable. Take a moment to reflect on your relationships. Do you feel empowered in their presence, or do you walk away feeling drained and diminished? If the latter is true, it's time to pause and reassess. Marcus Aurelius wisely said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." When a relationship consumes your thoughts with negativity or doubt, it's no longer serving its purpose. In my case, I realized that every interaction with him left me questioning my value. He would highlight my flaws, minimize my successes, and subtly imply that my worth was tied to how well I pleased her. This was not love. This was control disguised as a connection. Breaking away was not easy. It meant confronting the guilt of walking away from someone I had cared about deeply. But as I took those first steps, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in years, I felt free to be unapologetically myself. Letting go of relationships that demand your self-worth as their price tag is not selfish, it's necessary. It's an act of love for yourself, an acknowledgement that your value is not up for negotiation. As Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Mastery begins with knowing when to say no, even to those closest to you. So ask yourself, who in your life makes you feel like you're not enough? And why are they still a part of your journey? Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. 2. Financial manipulation reveals true intentions. Family bonds are often described as unbreakable, a sacred connection that endures through thick and thin. But what happens when that bond becomes one-sided? When one family member uses their connection with you not for love or support, but for convenience and gain? I remember an uncle from my childhood who always seemed to have excuses whenever he was asked to contribute, be it for family gatherings, helping a relative in need, or sharing responsibilities. Yet his life was far from one of struggle. He would indulge in luxurious vacations, flaunt expensive purchases, and live comfortably. His words, however, always revolved around what he couldn't do when it came to others. At first, I thought it was an oversight, perhaps bad timing, but the pattern repeated itself. Every time the family needed him, he would decline, offering reasons that sounded hollow. It became clear that his financial excuses were less about necessity and more about avoiding responsibility. Epictetus once said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." Stoicism reminds us that the true measure of a person lies not in their material wealth, but in their willingness to share and support others selflessly. Relationships, especially within a family, require reciprocity. When someone only takes without giving, the bond weakens. Financial manipulation isn't always blatant. It often comes in subtle forms: refusing to share expenses while benefiting from collective efforts, guilt-tripping others into covering for them, or using financial dependency to control those around them. In my uncle's case, his actions sowed resentment among family members. Slowly, people began to distance themselves, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. When faced with this kind of behavior, it's natural to feel conflicted. After all, we're taught to forgive and overlook shortcomings, especially within our families. But Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Allowing manipulation to continue isn't kindness, it's enabling a harmful cycle. To navigate this situation, I had to reflect deeply on what mattered most. Maintaining the relationship at the cost of fairness and mutual respect wasn't sustainable. So I chose honesty. The next time my uncle avoided contributing, I gently but firmly addressed the issue. Your actions make it difficult for others to trust your commitment to this family. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was necessary. For those dealing with similar dynamics, know this: setting boundaries isn't an act of rejection, it's an affirmation of your values. It's a way to protect the integrity of your relationships. If someone consistently refuses to meet you halfway, it may be time to step back and reassess. True relationships, whether by blood or choice, should be founded on mutual care and shared responsibility. As Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." Don't let anyone's unwillingness to contribute devalue the strength of your connection. 3. Release pain. Embrace freedom. Letting go of a friendship you've cherished for nearly a decade feels like tearing a page from a book you've loved. The ink remains, the memories linger, but the story no longer serves you. This was my reality with my best friend of 9 years. What started as a connection filled with shared dreams and unending laughter slowly became a weight I could no longer carry. For years I justified his actions, his dismissive comments, his growing indifference, and his habit of highlighting my shortcomings. I thought, he's just stressed, or it's my job to support him. But over time, the excuses began to crumble under the burden of my unhappiness. Epictetus once wrote, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." In choosing to let go, I had to face the uncomfortable truth that clinging to a toxic relationship out of fear of loneliness was my own weakness. One day, we were planning a trip, a rare moment of shared excitement. But when the time came to finalize, he backed out, not with regret, but with excuses. The same pattern is repeated again. I felt the familiar pang of disappointment, but this time, it was different. I wasn't angry. I was exhausted. I realized I had become the sole caretaker of a friendship that no longer had balance or reciprocity. The hardest part of letting go isn't the act itself. It's the guilt that comes after. Stoicism teaches us that our minds are the architects of our suffering. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." I reflected deeply and asked myself, was I clinging to her, or was I clinging to the comfort of familiarity? In letting him go, I didn't choose anger or bitterness. I chose freedom. Freedom to rediscover myself without the shadows of his judgment. Freedom to invest my time in relationships that uplift rather than drain. Cutting ties doesn't erase the good moments you've shared. It simply acknowledges that the present no longer aligns with the past. It wasn't easy to tell him. Our final conversation was simple but honest. I told him, I'll always value the years we've shared, but I think we've grown in different directions. He didn't argue, and perhaps that was the final confirmation I needed. Some bonds don't break, they simply fade, like the setting sun marking the end of a chapter. To those listening now, know this. Letting go isn't an act of cruelty, it's an act of self-respect. As Seneca wrote, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. When a relationship no longer brings peace, release the pain and embrace the freedom to grow. 4. Toxic relationships drain your peace. In life, some relationships begin as a sanctuary, a place of comfort and connection. Over time, however, they can transform into something that erodes your peace and confidence. This shift often happens so gradually that we fail to notice the weight we're carrying until it's too heavy to bear. I once knew a colleague who seemed at first like a beacon of positivity. We worked well together, shared stories over coffee, and even leaned on each other during challenging times. But as the months turned into years, something changed. Conversations became one-sided. Criticism replaced encouragement. Every interaction left me questioning my worth. Stoicism teaches us the value of inner peace. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. When a relationship leaves your mind clouded with negativity or doubt, it's a sign that something is fundamentally wrong. One evening, after a particularly draining day, I sat alone and reflected on our dynamic. It wasn't just the occasional disagreement or clash of ideas. Those are natural. It was the constant undercurrent of tension, the feeling that my presence was being taken for granted. I realized I wasn't just tolerating this relationship. I was allowing it to shape my thoughts and diminish my self-respect. In practical terms, toxic relationships manifest in many ways. It could be the friend who constantly dismisses your achievements, the family member who expects your unconditional support but offers none in return, or even a partner who undermines your efforts to grow. These patterns may seem small in isolation, but over time, they create a ripple effect, draining your energy and your peace. Walking away from such relationships is never easy. We often hold on to them because of shared history or out of fear of confrontation. But Epictetus wisely said, it's not what happens to you but how you react to it that matters. When faced with toxicity, choosing to step away is not a failure. It's an act of strength and self-preservation. After recognizing the toll this relationship was taking, I made the decision to address it. Calmly but firmly, I expressed how I felt. The response was defensive, as I had anticipated, but it reinforced my decision to create distance. And when I did, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The silence that followed wasn't loneliness, it was peace. To anyone struggling with similar situations, I offer this thought. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Protecting your peace is not selfish, it is necessary for your well-being. As Seneca wrote, he who is brave is free. Free yourself from the chains of negativity and choose relationships that nurture your mind and soul. Ask yourself, is this relationship building you up or breaking you down? If it's the latter, perhaps it's time to reclaim your peace. 5. Broken promises break trust. Trust is the foundation of every meaningful relationship. Without it, even the strongest bonds crumble. When promises are broken repeatedly, they don't just fracture trust. They erode the respect and connection that hold relationships together. It may start with small disappointments, canceling plans, forgetting commitments, but over time these actions reveal something deeper, a lack of regard for your time, effort, and emotions. I remember another friend who was always enthusiastic when making plans. He'd say, "Let's meet for lunch this weekend," or "I'll call you tomorrow to catch up." Yet more often than not, those promises fell through. At first, I brushed it off, telling myself, he's probably just busy. But as it happened again and again, I began to notice a pattern. His words were filled with intention, but his actions spoke of indifference. Stoicism teaches us to focus on what we can control. Epictetus reminds us, men are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. While I couldn't change his behavior, I could change how I responded to it. I had to ask myself, am I holding on to this friendship out of hope, or am I ignoring the reality that his actions show? Broken promises do more than inconvenience us. They create emotional dissonance. Each time he failed to follow through, I felt less valued. It wasn't the missed lunch or forgotten call that hurt. It was the message they carried. You are not a priority. One day, after another canceled plan, I decided to confront the issue. I told him, "Your words mean a lot to me, but when your actions don't match, it feels like I'm not important to you." His response was apologetic, but it lacked genuine change. It was then I realized that some people's inconsistency isn't about malice. It's about their inability to see the impact of their actions on others. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." Instead of expecting others to meet your standards, focus on building relationships with those who naturally align with your values. Broken promises aren't always intentional, but when they become habitual, they reveal a relationship that no longer serves mutual respect or growth. Choosing to step back from that friendship was difficult, but it brought clarity. I no longer spent my energy waiting or wondering if he would follow through. I freed myself from the emotional weight of unmet expectations and opened space for people who valued my time and trust. So, reflect on your own life. Are there relationships where broken promises have become the norm? Remember, trust is not just a gift, it's a responsibility. Protect yours. Surround yourself with those whose actions speak louder than their words. As Seneca wrote, "Every man prefers belief to the exercise of judgment. Exercise yours wisely." 6. Distance creates room for growth. Sometimes, the hardest lesson we learn is that distance, not closeness, is what allows relationships to evolve. For 9 years, my best friend and I were inseparable. But as time passed, something shifted. Conversations felt strained, laughter became rare, and the connection we once had seemed to fade. I fought to hold on, clinging to the memories of what we used to be. Yet, no amount of effort could restore what had quietly unraveled. It was during one of our final conversations that I realized the truth. We weren't the same people anymore. Life had taken us in different directions, shaping us in ways that no longer aligned. While the realization was painful, it was also freeing. As Marcus Aurelius said, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart." In the months that followed, we gradually stopped reaching out to each other. There was no dramatic confrontation, no bitterness, just silence. At first, the quiet felt like a loss, an empty space where our friendship had once been. But as time went on, I began to understand the purpose of that space. It wasn't emptiness, it was room for growth. Distance allowed me to reflect on who I had become and what I truly valued. Without the weight of a strained friendship, I found clarity and focus. And though I don't know his thoughts during this time, I hope that he, too, found the same sense of freedom and growth. As Epictetus reminds us, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. This experience taught me that relationships, like all things in life, are subject to change. We often resist this truth, fearing that letting go means failure. But in reality, creating distance is an act of respect, both for ourselves and for the other person. It allows each of us to pursue the paths we're meant to follow, unburdened by expectations that no longer serve us. Today, we rarely speak, and yet I hold no resentment. In fact, I feel gratitude for the years we shared and the lessons learned. Our friendship, though changed, still holds a special place in my heart. It taught me that love and growth can coexist, even from afar. So ask yourself, is there a relationship in your life that's holding you back? Not out of malice, but simply because you've outgrown it. As Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Embrace the distance. Trust that it's creating space for something greater, both for you and for them. 7. Lack of empathy kills connection. Empathy is the invisible thread that holds relationships together. Without it, even the deepest love can wither into loneliness. I once observed this unfold in a couple I knew. On the surface, they seemed inseparable, a picture-perfect pair who shared laughter and warmth in public. But beneath that facade, cracks were forming. The man, a close acquaintance of mine, often confided in me about his struggles. He worked long hours, trying to support their shared dreams, but whenever he expressed his exhaustion or concerns, his partner would dismiss him. "You're overthinking. Why can't you just handle it like everyone else?" Her responses weren't cruel, but they were indifferent, a subtle dismissal of his feelings that left him feeling unseen. Stoicism teaches us to focus on what we can control. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." But tolerance does not mean enduring disregard for your emotions. The man began to internalize her dismissiveness, believing he was the problem until he reached a breaking point. One evening, after another fruitless attempt to share his struggles, he told me, "I feel like I'm talking to a wall. She listens, but she doesn't hear me." That single sentence captured the silent grief of love without empathy. Over time, he stopped sharing his thoughts, retreating into silence, and their relationship became a hollow shell of what it once was. This couple taught me a valuable lesson. Empathy is not optional. Relationships thrive on mutual recognition of each other's humanity. When one partner refuses to step into the other's shoes, the connection becomes strained and then broken. As Epictetus reminds us, we are not disturbed by what happens to us, but by our thoughts about what happens. For my acquaintance, the lack of empathy led him to believe he wasn't worthy of understanding, a thought more painful than any external conflict. Eventually, the couple parted ways. It wasn't a dramatic breakup, but a quiet acceptance that their love had faded into something unrecognizable. Reflecting on this, I understood the wisdom in Seneca's words. The greatest remedy for anger is delay. If only they had paused, taken the time to truly listen, to truly see one another, their story might have ended differently. If you find yourself in a relationship where your voice feels unheard, where your emotions are dismissed, ask yourself, is this love, or is this a habit you're afraid to break? True love listens, true love sees, and true love cares. As Epictetus said, only the educated are free. Educate your heart to recognize the relationships that lift you and have the strength to release the ones that don't. 8. Refusal to grow drags you down. Growth is the lifeblood of every meaningful relationship. When one person refuses to acknowledge their part in the cracks that form, the bond begins to wither. You may wonder, as I often did, why didn't we just sit down and talk it out? Why couldn't we fix it together? We tried, many times, but the conversations always ended the same way. He dismissed the issues, deflecting blame and insisting the rift was my fault. At first, I doubted myself. I questioned whether I had been too harsh or too impatient. But as Epictetus wisely said, it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. His unwillingness to see his role in the imbalance of our friendship became the greatest obstacle. No matter how much I tried to share my feelings, the response was always the same. A wall of defensiveness that left me feeling unheard and unseen. In those moments, I realized a hard truth. Some people are not ready to grow, and that is not your burden to carry. Stoicism teaches us that we cannot control others, only our response to them. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. It was time for me to stop arguing, stop waiting, and start protecting my peace. In our final months of friendship, I noticed a recurring theme. Whenever I pointed out a behavior that hurt me, he would turn the conversation into a critique of my shortcomings. It wasn't a dialogue, it was a defense mechanism. His inability to take accountability turned every attempt at resolution into another layer of frustration. The breaking point came during a discussion about a missed commitment. I expressed how it made me feel undervalued. His reply? Maybe you're expecting too much. I never asked for this friendship to be so demanding. Those words cut deeply, but they also brought clarity. A relationship where only one person grows, learns, and tries is not a partnership. It's a performance. Walking away wasn't about giving up on him. It was about choosing not to abandon myself. I had grown beyond the version of me who would accept being dismissed and devalued. Seneca said, "As is a tale, so is life. Not how long it is, but how good it is what matters." The length of our friendship no longer justified its weight on my soul. If you find yourself in a similar situation, remember this. You are not responsible for someone else's refusal to grow. Your journey doesn't end because they choose to stay behind. As we reflect on the lessons shared today, it's important to remember that each of these principles isn't just an abstract concept. They are tools for cultivating peace and strength in our daily lives. The journey of letting go, whether it's from a toxic relationship, broken promises, or an unwillingness to grow, is not an easy one, but it is one that leads to liberation and inner peace if we have the courage to walk that path. Each of the signs we discussed, Whether it's recognizing when a relationship drains your energy, when a lack of empathy erodes connection, or when the refusal to grow stunts your own potential, offers us an opportunity for reflection. Stoicism teaches us to face these truths with clarity, without judgment, and to use them as stepping stones for personal growth. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy, Marcus Aurelius wisely said. Instead, our goal is not to conquer others, but to conquer ourselves, to make choices that are in alignment with our values and our need for peace. This is not a one-time decision. It's a practice of creating boundaries, of choosing self-respect over guilt, and of trusting that sometimes letting go is the greatest act of love we can offer ourselves and others. I encourage you to take these lessons into your own life. Practice them daily. Be mindful of the relationships you nurture, and ask yourself, are they bringing you peace, or are they dragging you away from the life you deserve? Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe to Stoic Narratives Official. Feel free to share your own stories in the comments below, and let's continue to grow together, learning from one another.